Side 3. Meanwhile, people were starting home, singing and hurrahing their way up the Rue de Seine. Grenouille smelled his way down the dark alley and out onto the Rue de Petits Augustins, which lay parallel to the Rue de Seine and led to the river. A little while later, the dead girl was discovered. A hue and cry arose. Torches were lit. The watch arrived. Grenouille had long since gained the other bank. That night his closet seemed to him a palace, and his plank bed a four-poster. Never before in his life had he known what happiness was. He knew at most some very rare states of numbed contentment. But now he was quivering with happiness and could not sleep for pure bliss. It was as if he had been born a second time. No, not a second time, the first time. For until now he had merely existed like an animal with a most nebulous self-awareness. But after today, he felt as if he finally knew who he really was. Nothing less than a genius. And that the meaning and goal and purpose of his life had a higher destiny, nothing less than to revolutionize the odoriferous world, and that he alone in all the world possessed the means to carry it off, namely, his exquisite nose, his phenomenal memory, and, most important, the master scent taken from that girl in the Rue des Marais. Contained within it was the magic formula for everything that could make a scent, a perfume, great. Delicacy, power, stability, variety, and terrifying, irresistible beauty. He had found the compass for his future life. And like all gifted abominations, for whom some external event makes straight the way down into the chaotic vortex of their souls, Grenouille never again departed from what he believed was the direction fate had pointed him. It was clear to him now why he had clung to life so tenaciously, so savagely. He must become a creator of scents, and not just an average one, but rather the greatest perfumer of all time. And during that same night, at first awake and then in his dreams, he inspected the vast rubble of his memory. He examined the millions and millions of building blocks of odor and arranged them systematically, good with good, bad with bad, fine with fine, coarse with coarse, fetid with fetid, ambrosial with ambrosial. In the course of the next week, this system grew ever more refined, the catalogue of odors ever more comprehensive and differentiated, the hierarchy ever clearer. And soon he would begin to erect the first carefully planned structures of odor. Houses, walls, stairways, towers, cellars, rooms, secret chambers. An inner fortress built of the most magnificent odors, that each day grew larger, that each day grew more beautiful and more perfectly framed. A murder had been the start of this splendor. If he was at all aware of the fact, it was a matter of total indifference to him. Already he could no longer recall how the girl from the Rue des Marais had looked, not her face, not her body. He had preserved the best part of her and made it his own, the principle of her scent. There was a baker's dozen of perfumers in Paris in those days. 6 of them resided on the right bank, 6 on the left, and 1 exactly in the middle, that is, on the Pont au Change, which connected the right bank with the Ile de la Cité. This bridge was so crammed with 4-story buildings that you could not glimpse the river when crossing it, and instead imagined yourself on solid ground on a perfectly normal street, and a very elegant one at that. Indeed, the Pont au Change was considered one of the finest business addresses in the city. The most renowned shops were to be found here. Here were the goldsmiths, the cabinet makers, the best wig makers and purse makers, the manufacturers of the finest lingerie and stockings, the picture framers, the riding boot merchants, the embroiderers of epaulettes, the moulders of gold buttons, and the bankers. And here as well stood the business and residence of the perfumer and glover Giuseppe Baldini. Above his display window was stretched a sumptuous green lacquered baldachin, next to which hung Baldini's coat of arms, all in gold, a golden flacon from which grew a bouquet of golden flowers. And before the door lay a red carpet, also bearing the Baldini coat of arms embroidered in gold. When you opened the door, Persian chimes rang out, and 2 silver herons began spewing violet-scented toilet water from their beaks into a gold-plated vessel, which in turn was shaped like the flacon in the Baldini coat of arms. Behind the counter of light boxwood, however, stood Baldini himself, old and stiff as a pillar, in a silver-powdered wig and a blue coat adorned with gold frogs. A cloud of the frangipani with which he sprayed himself every morning enveloped him almost visibly, removing him to a hazy distance. So immobile was he looked like part of his own inventory. Only if the chimes rang and the herons spewed, both of which occurred rather seldom, did he suddenly come to life, his body folding up into a small, scrambling figure that scurried out from behind the counter with numerous bows and scrapes, so quickly that the cloud of frangipani could hardly keep up with him, and bid his customer take a seat while he exhibited the most exquisite perfumes and cosmetics. Baldini had thousands of them. His stock ranged from essence absolue, floral oils, tinctures, extracts, secretions, balms, resins, and other drugs in dry, liquid, or waxy form, through diverse pomade, pastes, powders, soaps, creams, sachets, bandolines, brillantines, moustache waxes, wart removers, and beauty spots, all the way to bath oils, lotions, smelling salts, toilet vinegars, and countless genuine perfumes. But Baldini was not content with these products of classic beauty care. It was his ambition to assemble in his shop everything that had a scent or in some fashion contributed to the production of scent. And so in addition to incense pastilles, incense candles, and incense cords, there were also sundry spices, from anise seeds to cinnamon bark, syrups, cordials and fruit brandies, wines from Cyprus, Malaga, and Corinth, honeys, coffees, teas, candied and dried fruits, figs, bonbons, chocolates, chestnuts, and even pickled capers, cucumbers and onions, and marinated tuna. Plus perfumed sealing waxes, stationery, lover's ink scented with attar of roses, writing kits of Spanish leather, pen holders of white sandalwood, caskets and chests of cedar wood, potpourris and bowls of flower petals, brass incense holders, crystal flacons and cruses with stoppers of cut amber, scented gloves, handkerchiefs, sewing cushions filled with mace, and musk-sprinkled wallpaper that could fill a room with scent for more than a century. Naturally, there was not room for all these wares in the splendid but small shop that opened onto the street, or to the bridge. And so, for lack of a cellar, storage rooms occupied not just the attic, but the whole second and third floors, as well as almost every room facing the river on the ground floor. The result was that an indescribable chaos of odors reigned in the house of Baldini. However exquisite the quality of individual items, for Baldini bought wares of only highest quality, the blend of odors was almost unbearable, as if each musician in a 1,000-member orchestra were playing a different melody at fortissimo. Baldini and his assistants were themselves inured to this chaos, like aging orchestra conductors, all of whom are hard of hearing, of course. And even his wife, who lived on the 4th floor, bitterly defending it against further encroachments by the storage area, hardly noticed the many odors herself anymore. Not so the customer entering Baldini's shop for the first time. The prevailing mishmash hit him like a punch in the face. Depending on his constitution, it might exalt or daze him, but in any case caused such a confusion of senses that he often no longer knew what he had come for. Errand boys forgot their orders, belligerent gentlemen grew queasy, and many ladies took a spell, half hysteric, half claustrophobic, fainted away, and could be revived only with the most pungent-smelling salts of clove oil, ammonia, and camphor. Under such conditions, it was really not at all astonishing that the Persian chimes at the door of Giuseppe Baldini's shop rang and the silver herons spewed less and less frequently. "Chenier!" Baldini cried from behind the counter, where for hours he had stood rigid as a pillar staring at the door. "Put on your wig!" And out from among the kegs of olive oil and dangling Bayonne hams appeared Chenier, Baldini's assistant, somewhat younger than the latter, but already an old man himself, and moved towards the elegant front of the shop. He pulled his wig from his coat pocket and shoved it on his head. "Are you going out, Monsieur Baldini?" "No," said Baldini. "I shall retire to my study for a few hours, and I do not wish to be disturbed under any circumstances." "Ah, I see. You are creating a new perfume." "Correct. With which to impregnate a Spanish hide for Count Veramont. He wants something completely new. He has asked for something like... I think he said it was called Amour and Psyche, and comes, he says, from that bungler in the Rue Saint-André-des-Arts, that... Pélissier? Yes, indeed. That's the bungler's name. Amour and Psyche by Pélissier. Do you know it? Yes, yes, I do indeed. You can smell it everywhere these days. Smell it on every street corner. But if you ask me, nothing special. It most certainly can't be compared in any way with what you will create, Monsieur Baldini. Naturally not. It's a terribly common scent, this Amour and Psyche. Vulgar? Oh, totally vulgar, like everything from Pélissier. I believe it contains lime oil. Really? What else? Essence of orange blossom, perhaps? And maybe tincture of rosemary, but I can't say for sure. It's of no consequence at all to me in any case. Naturally not. I could not care less what that bungler Pélissier slumps into his perfumes. I certainly would not take my inspiration from him, I assure you. You're absolutely right, monsieur. As you know, I take my inspiration from no one. As you know, I create my own perfumes. I do know, monsieur. I alone give birth to them. I know. And I am thinking of creating something for Count Veramont that will cause a veritable furore. I am sure it will, Monsieur Baldini. Take charge of the shop. I need peace and quiet. Don't let anyone near me, Chenier. And with that he shuffled away, not at all like a statue, but as befitted his age, bent over, but so far that he looked almost as if he had been beaten, and slowly climbed the stairs to his study on the second floor. Chenier took his place behind the counter, positioning himself exactly as his master had stood before, and stared fixedly at the door. He knew what would happen in the next few hours. Absolutely nothing in the shop, and up in Baldini's study, the usual catastrophe. Baldini would take off his blue coat, drenched in frangipani, sit down at his desk, and wait for inspiration. The inspiration would not come. He would then hurry over to the cupboard with its hundreds of vials and start mixing them haphazardly. The mixture would be a failure. He would curse, fling open the window, and pour the stuff into the river. He would try something else. That, too, would be a failure. He would then rave and rant and throw a howling fit there in the stifling, odor-filled room. At about 7 o'clock he would come back down, miserable, trembling and whining, and say, "Chenier, I've lost my nose. I cannot give birth to this perfume. I cannot deliver the Spanish hide to the Count. All is lost. I am dead inside. I want to die. Chenier, please help me die." And Chenier would suggest that someone be sent to Pélissier's for a bottle of Amour and Psyche, and Baldini would acquiesce, but only on condition that not a soul should learn of his shame. Chenier would swear himself to silence, and tonight they would perfume Count Veramont's leather with the other man's product. That was how it would be, no doubt of it, and Chenier only wished that the whole circus were already over. Baldini was no longer a great perfumer. At one time, to be sure, in his youth, 30, 40 years ago, he had composed Rose of the South and Baldini's Gallant Bouquet, the two truly great perfumes to which he owed his fortune. But now he was old and exhausted, and did not know current fashions and modern tastes, and whenever he did manage to concoct a new perfume of his own, it was some totally old-fashioned, unmarketable stuff that within a year they had to dilute 10 to 1 and peddle as an additive for fountains. What a shame, Chenier thought as he checked the sit of his wig in the mirror. A shame about old Baldini. A shame about his beautiful shop. because he's sure to ruin it. And a shame about me, because by the time he has ruined it, I'll be too old to take it over. Giuseppe Baldini had indeed taken off his redolent coat, but only out of long-standing habit. The odour of frangipani had long since ceased to interfere with his ability to smell. He had carried it about with him for decades now, and he no longer noticed it at all. And although he had closed the doors to his study and asked for peace and quiet, he had not sat down at his desk to ponder and wait for inspiration, for he knew far better than Chénier that inspiration would not strike. After all, it never had before. He was old and exhausted, that much was true, and was no longer a great perfumer. But he knew that he had never in his life been one. He had inherited Rose of the South from his father, and the formula for Baldini's gallant bouquet had been bought from a travelling Genoese spice salesman. The rest of his perfumes were old, familiar blends. He had never invented anything. He was not an inventor. He was a careful producer of traditional scents. He was like a cook who runs a great kitchen with a routine and good recipes, but has never created a dish of his own. He staged this whole hocus-pocus with a study and experiments and inspiration and hush-hush secrecy, only because that was part of the professional image of a perfumer and lover. A perfumer was 50% alchemist who created miracles. That's what people wanted. Fine. That his art was a craft like any other, only he knew, and was proud of the fact. He didn't want to be an inventor. He was very suspicious of inventors, for they always meant that some rule would have to be broken. And he had no intention of inventing some new perfume for Count Veramont. Nor was he about to let Chénier talk him into obtaining Amor and Psyche from Pélissier this evening. He already had some. There it stood on his desk by the window, in a little glass flacon with a cut-glass stopper. He had bought it a couple of days before. Naturally, not in person. He couldn't go to Pélissier and buy perfume in person, but through a go-between who had used yet another go-between. Caution was necessary. Because Baldini did not simply want to use the perfume to scent the Spanish hide. The small quantity he had bought was not sufficient for that in any case. He had something much nastier in mind. He wanted to copy it. This was, moreover, not forbidden. It was merely highly improper. To create a clandestine imitation of a competitor's perfume and sell it under one's own name was terribly improper. But more improper still was to get caught at it, and that was why Chénier must know nothing about it, for Chénier was a gossip. How awful that an honest man should feel compelled to travel such crooked paths. How awful that the most precious thing a man possesses, his own honor, should be sullied by such shabby dealings. But what was he to do? Count Veramont was, after all, a customer he dared not lose. He had hardly a single customer left now. He would soon have to start chasing after customers, as he had in his 20s at the start of his career, when he had wandered the streets with a box full of wares dangling at his belly. God knew he, Giuseppe Baldini, owner of the largest perfume establishment in Paris, with the best possible address, only managed to stay out of the red by making house calls, valise in hand. And that did not suit him at all, for he was well over 60 and hated waiting in cold antechambers and parading eau de mille fleurs and 4 thieves' vinegar before old marquises and foisting a migraine salve off on them. Besides which, there was such disgusting competition in those antechambers.